This is the Historic District Commission special special meeting for pre-applications. Date is January 24th, 2024, and the time is 12:30. This hearing was noticed in the Fairfield Citizen on Friday, January 19th. And I'll take attendance. See if it's here. Rosina Negron, Commissioner.
Here.
Jim Bohan, alternate commissioner.
Here, thank you.
And Art Urbanus is absent. Aaron Raymond Locke is absent. Ford Clark, commissioner.
I'm here, Adam.
Thank you. And I'm Adam Clyber, commissioner. And so we have. All right. So the first on the agenda is for you, Bonnie. 163 Harbor Road, the property located at 163 Harbor Road.
Jack Franzen is going to be doing the presentation for me today. And he's on.
Okay.
Hi, Jack.
So this
Jack.
is, just so we know, it's just an informal meeting, informal pre-application meeting. We're not voting on anything.
Absolutely.
We're just going to give you give feedback on your proposal.
And the extra time on your behalf is very much appreciated. So thank you on all of your behalfs.
Yeah, no problem. And Darren Raymond Locke has joined us.
Yep, sorry about that. I can hear you all now.
Okay.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yeah, hear you,
Yes.
Jack.
Good. So I want to share my screen. I hope it works better than last time. I think it should.
Not sure where I'm
You're
Can
sharing.
you see? Okay, great. Okay, so basically, Bonnie reached out to me for a number of reasons, but I mean, whatever happens on this property, I'm going to be looking at it out of my office window. So I have sort of an ulterior motive in trying to work something out for her. She wanted me to show you the survey, which basically you can see she's in the flood zone, it's the AE 12. The massing opportunities here that are available are limited because of the setback line, which is that red line that you can see here. And then on top of that, we had the storm a couple Saturdays ago, which underscored the need to lift the house. I mean, I think it would be really a mistake not to lift the house. And I believe the town has recommended to her that it be lifted 5 feet. And that would bring it up to, I think, elevation 15.64. And right now it's at elevation 10.64, with the garage being at 8.86.
So
And
Jack, is it what do you have to lift it to?
you
Or
have
like
to lift it
for FEMA?
about, it's about 3.36, I believe, because that would take it up to 14. And that would give you, if you had 12-inch joist, that would give you 12 inches of freeboard. But I think at zoning, they've advised her that the FEMA map is probably going to change again and to raise it higher than she has to. But that's something for us to discuss. So what I'm showing you, what I'm going to show you is I did a sketch here, which It's not wildly different from what she showed you, but this does raise the house up to 15.64. And I think there was a lot of confusion about what this house is. The house was designed by Bill Jackson, who was a pretty well-known colonial revival architect back in the mid 20th century. And he actually did some very beautiful homes. A lot of them are in Greenfield Hill. He did the bank across from the public library in downtown Fairfield. He did the Greenfield Hill Church House. He did a number of single-family homes in Southport, this being one of them. And I don't remember what it looked like before it was remodeled, but I think that he was probably in the early 50s. He was a disciple of an architect from Boston named Royal Barry Wills. And Royal Barry Wills was the master of the Cape Cod House. And if you're interested in him, you can look at his monograph. He actually used to sell plans to people. You could mail order plans and build your own Cape Cod house. The other house that I'm familiar with that he did in Southport is the one on 101 Old South Road, which is not your typical Cape because it has a half story and a semi-attached garage. And this is another Royal Barry Wills house that I thought was useful because it shows where he had married a Cape Cod roof line with a two-story roof line. And he messed with the fenestration to create a little more horizontally oriented proportions with the facade by grouping the windows together the way that he did. So that was a little bit about what I had sketched for Bonnie. And I realized this is not a lot different from what you saw, but it's just, I don't know what else you can do here. It is lower. It's, I discussed with her framing the joists instead of 2x12s going to 9.5-inch LVLs, which picks up a couple 3 inches on each level, and then starting the eave lower so that the eave starts right above the second story windows. And it still keeps the ceiling heights that she requested, which was 8.5 feet on the first floor, 8.5 feet on the second floor. And then I think there's about 200 square feet of FAR available in the attic if there's a shed dormer. The garage roof gets raised, but the garage slab cannot be raised. And because you're not allowed to fill on these flood lifts. You are allowed an allowance for more steps because they realize you have to get up to your new first floor. So the front door is elevated. The door into the mudroom would be on grade. And you'd go up some steps on the inside. So there wouldn't be two massive staircases on the front of the house. So I guess what I told her is, I mean, I think if the commission can give us some direction on the massing concept that we can explore, and maybe in more detail, maybe this isn't it, but I don't know what else there would be that wouldn't take us back to Zoning Board of Appeals. And just, I guess now happy to hear what you're thinking.
What's the existing ceiling heights?
7.7. 7.7 on the first
7.7.
floor and
you want
about
to raise them to
7.6.
8.6.
Pardon me?
And you want to raise them to 8'6"?
On just in this section of the house.
Well,
They
they're right
need
there.
to
I mean,
be-
you can. They need to be 8'6".
I actually preferred 9, which is pretty standard, but yes, 8.6.
Okay, well, I'm just trying to help you with trying to reduce the massing. And you don't need to have 8'6" ceilings. I know that for a fact. 8 foot is fine. And if the house has 7'6" or 7'8" foot ceilings, it's actually okay to work with that in an older house like this. And it would help reduce the massing by quite a bit. Right?
Adam, I think at this point,
Just
I'm sorry, I thought you were finished.
Bonnie, why don't we let everyone say what they think?
Go ahead.
Okay,
And then we can digest it.
sounds good.
That's a better.
so there's also, I'm seeing a 3rd floor with a dormer on it. Yeah.
That's this area here. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, the section shows so the back of the house would have a shed dormer. Right?
And that would have to be less than 50% of the length of the roof. Otherwise, it would count as a story.
Kind of a story. Yeah. So again, I mean, I know I'm not sure why you need to have a 3rd floor on this house. You could dormer out a 2nd floor and keep the roof line much lower. So anyway, those are my comments. Let's go around and Rosina, do you have some comments on the?
Is there anything on the rear side of the house that was kind of a bit concerned when you presented?
Yeah, we haven't gotten that far but whatever, I think the rear would follow on the front, and I advised Bonnie that, the windows would have to change and the railings would have to change. And obviously the roof line would be whatever is done on the front would be reflected on the back. So I'm trying to encourage her to pick up on the Bill Jackson vibe on this house. There are a lot of examples of his work in town, and there's no reason not to introduce some of them on this property. And I think, there's a provenance there that needs to be respected.
Okay. Thank you.
Darren?
When you last presented, my biggest concerns were on the rear of the house. And I can't really see what is being proposed there, because as Jack said, you haven't gotten that far yet. But I mean, those were my biggest concerns. You had 3 different sets of windows, all of whom had different proportions. It was very contemporary looking. The walkout balcony with that parapet made it much bulkier. So, I mean, those were my kind of concerns. Initially, I'd really like to see the back.
Yeah, and I think my advice again was, and this was typical of Jackson and Cameron Clark, is the window panes on these houses were all either the same size or the same proportion. And what they did is they varied this if the window got bigger or smaller, it did in increments of panes. So you might have a 6/6 in one area and an 8/12 in another area, but the panes would all be the same size, or at least the same proportion.
Right.
So
I think
that
Sorry,
would be
go
the
ahead.
goal throughout the house on all 4 sides.
Okay, because I remember from the other drawings they were all 2/2s, but the proportions were very different across all the different sections of the house, and it just looked very, very busy. So one of my biggest concerns was getting that fenestration so that the proportions were at least consistent, so it didn't look like windows were being taken from various places and put on the back of the house.
Yeah, and I think that some of that came from the confusion about what style this house is, which is, it's colonial revival. It says in the book neo-colonial, but colonial revival, started in 1885 and it's still happening. So
Yeah.
that's what this is.
Yeah, the back just was it was a confusing mash of different styles originally because there were some Victorian elements, there was some, colonial revival elements, there was some contemporary, all getting mixed in. So the back was a very confusing aesthetic. So that was my biggest concern when it was presented last time. So that's basically what I've got to say.
Jim, do you have any questions or comments?
Are you speaking to Jack and I or the board, the commission?
I'm speaking to Jim Bohan.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry. Yeah, thank you very much, Jack. Good job. The most startling thing to me, as previously presented, was the elevation from the garage side of the house. When you're driving across that bridge right outside your office, Jack, I was, visualizing that. It was just that's where the mass really hit me. I know you probably don't have sketches of that left-hand elevation now, but I'm taking comfort from the fact that you're going to be looking at it. So can you talk a little bit about that, how that left-hand side of the elevation?
Let me pull up because I realize I think you were unintentionally silent at the last meeting. So let me see if I can. I think that is maybe that's not the right one. That's the other side. I'm not sure I have the elevation you're talking about.
But you see what I mean? And you see my concern?
There it is.
Let me go to the back as well. Yeah, so in this version, the garage really only had that one window, and then the whole back of the house was either a story and a half or 3 stories.
Is this what was previously presented, or is this new, Jack?
This is from the last hearing, I believe, Bonnie,
Right,
isn't
right.
that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Second presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was just trying to find what you were talking about.
Right.
I mean, when you look at it from the north, you see this roof line and then you see these stacked behind it.
Right.
So it's an odd, it's probably the kind of house that needs to be done in 3D to really show what it's going to look like. But
I
the
think at the very
proposal
first
here,
meeting that we had with, the very first on-site pre-application meeting I had with Bonnie, I suggested a 3-dimensional model. Just easier for the commissioners and the neighbors to understand.
yeah, to digest what's going on from all the different angles. So this is not just a
Yeah.
corner lot. It's a house you can see almost 360 degrees.
Right.
So the idea
Any
here
other
was,
comments, Jim?
That's all I have, Adam. Thank you.
yeah, in this version,
Okay.
the garage roof
ahead,
gets raised up with everything else because I think it looked kind of ridiculous, with the garage at the old elevation and everything much higher. But like was said before, we need to address what's going on in the back of the house as well.
Right.
I agree. The proportion of the garage actually looks better raised up. George, do you have any comments?
Jack, can you hear me? Can you hear me, Adam?
I can, yeah.
Okay. I think what you've done with the garage is actually softens the side of the house. because it gives you a step. And by adding, by lifting it a little bit, it actually softens the elevation. My concern is from the other direction. The picture you just opened a second ago, I think, paints it pretty clearly. Your screen, Jack, you just opened up the elevation from coming down Harbor.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's not it. It was an accident.
I got it. I
Yes.
got it.
Yeah, that's the old elevation before you raise it.
Right.
That's a formidable end, and when you see that coming down Harbor Road, it's a mass. And I'm not an architect, and I don't prepare to walk in your shoes, but if I were looking at a thought process, I would try and see if I could bring the elevated portion farther into the house, so that you had a step on the end, and then took a larger step to the higher elevation. I think it would soften the approach and give it an appearance of less mass. See where I'm coming from?
Yeah, I think I see what you're saying. In other words, if there was another step in here.
If
What you're
you can't
suggesting.
see my screen, I can't. But
Yeah.
if you outlined that center area where there are those 4 windows and made that just a little bit higher and lowered the portion on the right, you would give it a step appearance from coming down Harbor. It would look like less mass. It may have the same height elevation at the end of the day, but I think it wouldn't give you that facade of being 35 feet high, which is, I think, if I did my numbers right, I think you're probably pretty close to it by the time
It's actually.
by the time you raise it.
Yeah, what I drew here, I believe, is a couple feet lower than what was shown before, because I took the joist down and I lowered the rafters, so the rafters are now framed on top of the, on top of the second floor plate,
Yeah,
and I've got the rafters right on top of the windows, so there's no. I think the old version, there were several courses of shingles on top of the windows. If I could go back to that one.
but go back to that one for a minute, Jack. If you look at that, if you look down at the bottom of that picture,
Yeah.
that image that you had up there, slip it up a bit. If you go to grade, if you raise that now and go to grade on the one you're proposing for today, you've got what is that? Peak to ground, peak to new ground. What are we talking?
So what I came up with.
Yeah, on this
was-
one.
Yeah,
What's-
I think
what's- What's that build out at the bottom, in the middle?
so. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of topo on that survey, but I
Yep,
think the
yep.
elevation right at the front of the house is around elevation 10.
Yep.
And I know that it's 12 right when you get closer to the south property line. It's up here, but I think right around the front of the house, it's 10. So from where it hits the ground on the front, yeah, this is 10 right here. This line here is 10. So from 10 to the midpoint is 28, and it's about another 4.5, 5 feet to the peak.
But if you're coming down the road, you see whatever what's that in the middle of the foundation? Down at the bottom. What's that?
This here?
No, go to the elevation and from the side.
This
Are
here?
you looking
Side
at the
ele-
chimney?
What's this? Go below that. What's that box that you've got built out there?
That's the
This is-
chimney, I think.
It's a
Oh,
chimney.
yeah, this is
That's
the
a chimney.
chimney on the main house.
Okay,
Yeah,
so that's a grade, right? The bottom?
Yeah, so this is my guess as to where the grade is.
Yeah.
On the side of the house of 10.5. And then as you go up to the south, by the time you get to the property line, it's 12.
Mhm.
It's up here.
Yeah, I'm just looking at that whole facade and seeing it as a flat, very large plane. That is what people are going to see when they drive down Harbor Road, and I don't think that's very attractive. And it looks like a lot of mass. And I think it could be mitigated by a step. That's all I'm saying. some creative architecture.
Yeah, we could explore that. I just, if this roof were longer, I think it would be easier to do that because it's pretty short.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it's already pretty small.
might look a little choppy, but you know, it
But
might be.
what happens if you move what happens if you made that again, I don't know the structure. I
Yeah,
just know that you've got those 4 windows to the left. If that area was raised and the other area was brought down a little bit, would
I
you
think
achieve the same result?
I think I'd probably shift the dormer over to the taller part and then drop this down. I just think
Yeah.
the proportions might be odd looking, but you know, we haven't drawn it, so we don't know.
And also that center section can't be raised from a zoning standpoint.
From a what?
No, I think he's
No.
talking about this roof line, Bonnie.
Which, oh,
This roof,
the main roof
this
line on the
roof-
addition that we're talking about?
Yeah, this roof we cannot raise because it's, you know, in the setback. This is the only part of the house that's not in the setback.
Mhm.
So right now, as you see it, if you're coming
So
down.
you'd have to
Harper-
go for a variance.
Yes, which we cannot do. As we're going down Harbor Road toward the bridge, if that's what you're talking about, George?
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, so if you're driving down, and we do have a view of that actually in the picture from this last submission, but if you're driving down, you see the house right before it, the adjacent house, Bessie's house. This height now is about 2 feet lifted to 5 feet, 2 feet higher than Bessie's garage, her garage. And it's also set back from the garage, as well as just bringing the base of the house right now to the same elevation as the road. Because the house is very set down. Jack, do you have that photograph of the comparison with the adjacent house? It's a really
I'd
good
have to go.
example of how you really see it. Because right now, it's very much set down to all of the surrounding homes considerably, as well as the elevation of the road.
Mhm.
So it's really
I'm
almost just bringing
pres-
it up to a standard garage height. Or actually, I should say Bessie did an addition on her garage height with her addition.
I'm not talking about Betsy, or I'm really just focusing on this.
No,
Uh,
I understand, but I
Okay,
think
so
the elevation.
my
that you're
concern is that
discussing-
when you look at that facade, Jack, and you see the drawing that you've got there,
Yeah.
that's a large plane that appears to be a lot of mass. So how could we mitigate that?
Yeah, I got it.
There's a couple of ways also by lowering the floor heights, at least 6 inches of floor. That'll lower the roof line a foot.
Yeah, that would help.
And I think, and if you even lower the roof more and dormered out the windows, and I don't know how you do that with these 3 on the left side, but sort of embed those windows into the roof line or lower it even more.
Just something for you to chew on, Jack.
Yeah. No, I've got some ideas.
I know you.
I mean, I think aesthetically though, it looks better with the 6/1,
Yeah, much better.
you know.
Yeah, I think bringing the garage up a little bit helps look at the proportion from the front. Looks better. And I agree. I think I agree, Jim. I think it will actually look better coming from the bridge because what you won't be seeing the house, you know, looming down over the garage. So I think that's
Well,
possible.
also the amount of windows, the proportion of the amount of windows to siding on the garage was so vastly different from the proportion of windows to siding on the other sides of the building that I think it looks a little out of place.
Yeah.
And it's a garage, granted, but I think only one window on the back of that garage is not enough.
I agree.
Thank you, George. Yep.
Or is this enough to give you direction, or is there any more?
Bonnie, what do you think?
You don't,
I think,
unfortunately, without the
think-
back rear elevation, it's hard to.
I think, to Jack's point, we already discussed this. We're just going to pretty much, the plan is to follow suit with the front into the back and go back to, just a traditional colonial feeling and railing and the 6/1 windows to the correct proportion. I think pretty much we revised everything else as we heard. But it does have to be lifted, the
Yeah.
5 feet. I mean, there's just no doubt that fire department had to shut down the house.
yeah, so here's a suggestion that I have. I could do the other three sides of the house to the same level of detail that I have here pretty quickly. And I don't know if we need to convene the whole entire commission, but maybe we could meet with two people on the commission with that and see if we have something that's got the merit to go forward.
Yeah, I think that'd be fine. I think one of the big ones is addressing that I guess the westerly elevation or coming down harbor.
Yeah.
George
this
was
other-
talking about.
I'm going to call that
Try-
south.
trying to reduce
Yeah,
the mass of that.
Actually, you're right. It's kind of
Yeah.
west.
Yeah, we have ideas for that we think you'll be very happy with.
Good.
From a colonial standpoint.
But in terms of like the colonial revival look, I think it feels a lot more like a colonial revival than the previous
Right.
applications.
Absolutely. It's pretty. I like it.
And raising the garage roof, I think, balances it out better, especially when you're raising the whole thing for FEMA.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't
Jack,
raise the roof. We had to raise the walls, which in turn brings the roof up. So I guess it's the same difference.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But the ridge line
even
raises.
an arbor built on the end of the house, Jack, just to break up that facade, would just something to interrupt it. I think would be
Wait,
some-
where do you think, George? That's funny because Jack did present that. Where do
well,
Yeah. Yeah,
he's
this
a
is-
master.
you
If
This is
on
what-
Oh,
the
yeah.
end,
That got
Royal
nixed by
Berry Hills.
zoning,
what?
that arbor that Jack presented, unfortunately, because I can't have, that's just added to a setback issue that I don't have.
Well, they would let us do this. They wouldn't let us cover it. That's the problem. In other words, that an open
Yeah, have to
lattice,
cover it.
open lattice you can do, but the covered porch is what you see on there is what Matt had said we would be allowed to do with the lift.
That's what I'm thinking, Jack. You could do a lattice, something lattice on the house and soften it, and it would make that whole facade, instead of looking like a large white wall.
Oh, on the
would-
side, George?
Yeah, yes.
Well, I think Jack has really pretty windows planned for there too. It's not shown yet. But I was just thinking, to your point, the lattice on the back of the garage could be pretty too. To soften that corner.
Just trying to give you some thoughts.
Yeah, just
I don't
making
need
that
to see
whole wall
Jack.
would be really
Jack knows
pretty
what-
as a lattice.
Jack knows the plans.
And
No,
of course, the
All right.
details are going to be important, I think.
Yes.
Like column details. 'Cause I know like on the previous application, some of the details were very minimalistic. And I think a colonial revival probably needs more traditional detailing
Yes.
in terms of columns and whatever crowns, whatever exterior trim there is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm excited about it, actually.
Okay.
I like the direction that we're taking, so I hope you guys do too.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for your time. We'll
So yeah,
digest all
Jack, I
this.
look forward to, whenever you, have those drawings, the other elevations, let me know and we'll set something up.
Sounds good.
Jack, thank you, Bonnie.
Thank
Thank
you. Have
you.
a good day, everyone. Thanks again for your time.
All right,
Bye.
sure. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
All right, the next item on the agenda is, Felix Charney, 65 Station Street, property located at 65 Station Street. I see Chris here.
Chair, Commissioners, good to be with you. Chris Russo with Russo and Rizzio LLC, offices at 10 Sensico Road in Fairfield. I'm here with David Ball, who's the architect on it. Thank you for taking the time. I know this is a property we looked at a few months ago for a different type of project. So I appreciate you taking another look at another plan in a different direction. So I'll pull up the plan. So if you recall, when we met out at the site a few months ago, we were looking at a plan that had kept the existing office buildings, which you see here, the one here in the middle and the one on the right, but then also proposed a residential building that would have contained 5 units. That plan is right here. And if you remember something about this property, it's a split zone property. This top portion is in the NDD zone, the neighborhood design zone, and this bottom half is in the residence zone. We have some residences over here. We have an office building over on Station. And then over here on the left, we have Southport Congregational. So that plan proposed 5 units. It was compliant with setbacks for zoning. This is, I think, 30 feet in between the property line to the neighbors. And after our meeting, I know that when we met out at the site, there was some discussion about an office option or commercial option that had been submitted previously. And then in subsequent conversations with the town, the town also kind of let us know that they were supportive of the office option, and we're curious to see an option that would have office. So we've worked on designing this plan, and the proposal would be for an additional office building that would be located at the rear of the site, or the rear if you're coming from State Street, I should say. But the rear of the site, similar to where the residential was, but obviously, as you could see, it increased the setback from the residential neighbors. It locates it entirely within the NDD. It's a use that's permitted in the NDD. It moves it closer back towards the parking lot area of the church. And from a zoning perspective, it's compliant with setbacks, coverage, use, everything, and including parking, which I know in talking with some of the neighbors, I've met with some people from Southport Conservancy and Sasquatch. They've always expressed a concern about parking. And so this is fully compliant with the town's parking requirements. It also allows us to preserve, if you remember from when you were out there, those of you who went, there's an existing vegetated area back here, and it allows us to keep some of that. Some trees have to be removed with the extension of the parking area. You can kind of see in faint gray where the existing parking area basically ends right here. These are the last of the parking spaces. So we would expand it out to get the increased parking, but we are able to preserve this area, which on the residential plan, we weren't able to do that. It's an office building. It's just under 3,500 square feet per floor, so just under 7,000 in total. As far as design, and David's here, he can go into this further. But I could take you to the first slide just so you could see an overhead, looking from Station Street. Again, these two up in the foreground here are existing. The proposed building is in the back. David, do you wanna kind of go through the design, and I can run through the slides?
Sure. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So the first slide gives you a good sense of how the building fits on the site. And also in terms of the architecture, we're basically, I really have a little bit difficulty putting a style on this. Going through your requirements, it really does, I'll describe it as sort of barn-like, but the intent is to effectively match or be very similar to the existing architecture. So, in some of the other schemes we had gone through, there was, discussions of various styles. What may be positive about this is that it's really mimicking what's there. So it's not straying from the existing development. But, looking at this aerial, towards Station Street, there's a two-story building, and as you move towards the rear of the site, they're one-story. We're proposing a two-story building, and then, I think you just get a general read of what's happening on the site. So, Chris, if you go to the next slide, please. So, the top left view is sort of from the southeast of the building, from the parking lot, and that just gives you a general idea of what the building would be like from people seeing it on the site. And I'll just go around the horn here. So the bottom left is from I think technically it is still Station Street, but it's the roadway to the south of the railroad. And we're not trying to exaggerate. I just want to be clear. We're not trying to exaggerate the plantings, but we do renderings in these computerized systems. And generally speaking, that there's a fair amount of land there between our site and the roadway. It's pretty, heavily densified with various natural plantings, trees and bushes. So what you'll see from the roadway there is not very much. The bottom right is more or less what you'd be seeing from the church parking lot, and what the trees you're seeing there are, what we're proposing to do is putting evergreens of some sort to, mask the building from that location. And then the top right is from the same roadway at the railroad, and that's from the northeast of the site. So that also is fairly planted in with existing trees. And actually, before I go any further, I'm sorry, Chris, go back to the prior slide.
Yeah.
All right, so the top left gives you a general indication of what the building looks like. The intent on the architecture is to follow the same, slope and detailing of the roof lines. It would be the same shingles that's used throughout the rest of the site. The windows are, I believe, 6/6 and traditional, very similar to the existing windows. And the siding would be, vertical cedar siding painted to match the existing color. And then also the architecture, if you see a little bit, if you're looking at the building a little bit to the right, facing east, that is a glass front on both floors. So to sort of create the proportions of the elements of the building to be, you know, fairly well developed as far as, you know, a sense of, you know, traditional architecture, fairly simple proportions. And also, you know, on the front of the building facing the parking lot, that would be the south face of the building, same sort of thing. We're doing, you know, we're introducing gables to break up the massing of the building. And, you know, the window systems and the entry canopies are all intended to do that as well. So as much as it's not a specific style, it's very much similar to what's existing on the site. Next slide, please. So the top left is the view from Station Street, and really the building is quite a bit in the distance from there. The bottom left, oh, can't see it.
Yeah.
That's
from the church.
From the church, yeah. So it's a little bit further away. The bottom right is our best understanding of what that would be from the neighbors, and that is at the southwest corner of the site. There's a fairly substantial green area. There's some existing trees, a few we do have to take down to make the parking work, but we will introduce quite a few evergreens and also a couple of deciduous trees to maximize the screening effect of that area. That allows us to go 2 or 3 trees deep, so that the neighbors will not see very much of this building. And then the top right is from the railroad, more or less from the northeast of the site, and it's showing a good chunk of the site, including the existing buildings and then the new building in the distance. Next slide. And then, you know, Chris showed the site plan. Here it is in color and some shadows, but basically the building is at the northwest. It meets the setbacks, but also what's perhaps more importantly is it's in the neighborhood of 90 feet from, so the parking in front of the building to the south of the building is 60 feet wide, and the green space is an additional 30 plus feet at the southwest corner. So the building is in excess of 90 feet away from the south boundary. Next slide is a zoning slide that just, you know, we kind of went through all the zoning regulations and we're in compliance with all of them. And then this slide was just, you know, pictures of the neighboring buildings just to get a general sense of what the architecture is in the area. And again, in this case, we are really matching the existing architecture on the site. Next slide is the floor plan, fairly simple. At the bottom center is the main entrance for both floors, and there will be an elevator and a restroom on each floor. The office configuration you're seeing is not necessarily what will happen. It will be, you know, an open plan with some structure in the middle, but this is just trying to give an indication of how the inside of the building may lay out, where you have offices on the north and the south end, and then an open area in the middle, and at the east and the west is significant windows, which makes for a good open office space. And on the left side, you'll see this is on the first floor, there would be a small patio area. You know, it's kind of a nice natural area of the site, nice place to take a break outside for the people that use the building. And then next slide is the second floor. Similar thing, you know, the core in the middle, there's an extra egress stair on the right side. And then there would be a outdoor porch of sorts on the left side or west side. And again, similar guesstimate about how the office building would be laid out. Next slide would be the roof. And generally speaking, you know, we're using, again, the gable elements to break down the massing of the building. And the likely scenario is that the center of the roof, which would not be visible by anybody, would be where you probably put some mechanical units to, you know, serve as heating and air conditioning for the building. And also towards the middle bottom, you see a white rectangle. That would be the elevator extending up, you know, the height necessary. That would not be seen from the front of the building, but it would be, you know, inside, invisible to the outside. Next slide, please. So the elevations, again, you're seeing the, you know, a very simple architecture consistent with what's on the site. I think the glass in the middle, as described earlier, is a nice way to break up the facades and, you know, maintain sort of traditional proportions of gable elements. And the windows are, you know, traditional 6/6 windows. The windows at the front, that's the bottom elevation. The windows to the right side of the entrance are restrooms, so that would be a smaller square window up high, so, you know, privacy issues are addressed. The entry to the building you see is very similar to what's existing on the site in several of the buildings. And, you know, the materials are consistent with what's already there. The overall height of the building, by the way, of the midpoint of the gables, you know, per zoning is 26 feet 4. And then the, you know, if you went to the very top of the gable, it's in the neighborhood of 30 feet. Next slide is just the other two elevations and similar comments. The, you know, the top one would be, that's the east elevation facing sort of the other buildings on the site. And the bottom elevation is the north elevation, which is facing the railroad. And by the way, you know, it's a little bit like a mill building, you might say, but again, that doesn't really fall in the categories of sort of the traditional styles. And I think that is, that's it. Yeah, that's it. So we're open to conversations and questions.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a, from my perspective anyway, a much better proposal than the previous one. But we'll go around and see if, Darren, do you have any comments?
Overall, I think it's a good fit for the site. I think in terms of design, it looks respectful and sympathetic to the buildings that are there. The one thing that stood out to me, and I don't know necessarily how you'd address it, but it is visually there to me, is that the other buildings, the historic buildings, have very linear, simple roof lines, and the new building has cross gables, and it's a much busier roof line than the other buildings. But other than that, I really applaud your attempt at making it very respectful and sympathetic to the other buildings.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great. Rosina?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Rosina.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Or Jim. Go ahead, Jim. Go ahead.
I think Mr. Charney did a spectacular job in renovating the existing buildings. I've told people that we got basically a brand new 1890 building, and it looks super. So I would just encourage, if this is approved and pursued, anything you can do to emulate that. Like I wondered how he got windows that I believe matched an 1890 building, and they do. So I would just encourage, if approved and pursued, to do as much as possible of that type of thing, because the existing buildings look lovely, absolutely beautiful. The existing Ruger buildings. And that's all I have. And thank you very much, David.
Thanks, Jim. Rosina?
Thank you.
I agree with what Darren had said previously, that the proposal, it's much better with the existing buildings on the site. So I have no further comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, George?
I think the elevation is a good improvement from the earlier submission. The glass entrance wall. If you go back to your image that shows the opening, that it's a little jarring when you compare it to the other buildings, only because their buildings are kind of uptight, blocked in. I get what you're trying to get to. This is, I think it's pretty, but it's a little bit of a contrast to the other spaces. I guess I'd have to look at it and live with it for a minute before I tell you any more. But the elevation, how much do you think the peak of this will be seen from Pequot?
I don't think so. But we can, we have this modeled in 3D, so we can test that. I think there's quite a bit of vegetation in between.
It just
So,
was a big concern in the earlier proposals, and it would be nice to
Right.
stay ahead of that conversation, and be sympathetic to the people in the community who raised those issues. So I'd like to address that beforehand and not afterwards.
George,
So
if you don't mind, can you go back a slide? I just want to make sure I understand your comment about the glass. Now, are you saying at the
No,
entrance,
the
meaning
next
at
one.
the bottom?
that one, yeah, that
So
middle
you're saying
section,
on the side of the building, that guy right there.
right? Yeah, I get where you're going. I mean, I can see it from the inside, what you're trying to achieve. It just, when you look at that next to the other two Ruger buildings, it is a little bit of a transition.
Right, the departure. Yep. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not saying I'm unhappy with it. It's just I'd like to look at it. What?
I'm not sure you
Okay.
would see that that clearly, to be honest. It'll be hidden behind the existing buildings, and then coming in on an angle, those two gables sort of jut out in front and
Can you go back
mask
to
it a little
your site plan and just point that facade up? There you go. There you go. Right. So
that-
you're suggesting
That's
it's
the
in
side.
that.
Yeah, it would be on east and west, more or less. So that, and actually go back a slide or two. I think it's the first slide. Next one. That gives
Well,
you an
there it is. You
indication
can
of
see
what's
it there.
going on. But yeah.
I
And
see what
then
you
the
mean.
next one down. Yeah, that one. I think that's a good picture. Just get a sense of what that looks like. So sometimes in elevation it gives you an impression, but I think the top left is
Yeah, I'd
the one that.
probably relook at the graphics in that one elevation. But yeah, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Well, George, it's also it's not a bad thing to differentiate this building from the existing structures somewhat. It's its own entity,
The same.
and it is making a very a big attempt to relate to the existing structures without copying them.
I'm not saying I don't. It's just a little jarring when you look at that one image. But this is much fairer and much more sympathetic to what you're trying to achieve. So it's really only the elevation question I would ask.
Okay.
And the only comment I would make is like Darren brought up the roof lines and how it's busier. That one, the main entrance to the building, where it has the step gable.
Right.
I think it's a very contemporary sort of feature detail and that you find in, you know, like builder special colonials.
You're,
And maybe
you're
just using
saying
the main gable.
McMansions, right? I know what you mean.
I didn't want to use that
I know
word,
what
but
you mean. Yeah.
but I think if it was just a simple gable, you know what I mean, just a simple gable without the studs gable, then maybe it would just simplify that, make it seem less busy.
Yep. I
Overall, though, I
That
think, I
is-
mean, it's a big improvement from what was proposed earlier. I think this will be set back and, you know, vegetation aside, I'm not sure you would be able to see it from Pequot because it is set, you know, pushed all the way to the other side of the property.
Yeah, I'm only saying I want to address it then.
But
that's
worth
all.
looking at it in model.
Yeah.
We can take a look at that. And again, you know, we've done a fair amount of this where we take the rendering program and
Mhm.
we just want to make sure we're being real with the trees. It's easy to drop a bunch of trees and say to everybody, you're not going to see it, and then you can, and that's bad. So we'll study that and make sure
Well,
it's right.
David,
Right.
also, we don't consider vegetation. So
Right.
whether there's vegetation or not, we have to consider it without.
Yep.
And I don't think it's I don't
Okay.
think it's an unattractive structure or one that's way too massive. It seems like the scale is okay.
Yeah.
But, you know, so it's a question of elevation from Pequot. You
Right.
know what I mean? How much will you see? You might catch the ridge line or something. But
Right.
anyway.
But I think it's very harmonious with the other buildings.
Yeah, it's better. Any other comments from the commission? Okay.
No,
So do you guys have enough information, I think, to move forward or moving
Yeah,
forward?
That was very helpful.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Appreciate the time again on this property.
well, thank you.
No problem.
Okay.
Do you think you'll be
Okay, everybody.
submitting an application in the near future?
Well,
Or just
so
on
we
the
need to
preliminary phases?
have a survey done, site plan done, and then we'd have to go to P and Z for approval. And then you would want to see us after P and Z. We don't need, we are almost certain we don't need any variances. So it would just be P and Z. And then we come see you after P and Z.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're the last stop, so
We're the
whatever
last stop.
approvals you need prior to us.
So yeah, we would just have to go through that process, which will probably take, you know, a couple months depending on when the survey comes in, and then we'd come to you
Yeah.
if it's
just to
approved.
Be clear, we do actually have a survey, but we have to do the civil drawings, which will
Right,
take
exactly.
a little bit of time.
Yep.
So all that we've shown
Okay.
you on the drawings for setbacks, that's all accurate.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Very good.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank
guys. I guess we just need a motion to adjourn.
Regina,
I'll make a motion to.
Aaron makes a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
Rosina seconds. All in favor?
all right.
All right. Unopposed, we're adjourned.